now, just over a month away from the 2016 presidential election, and polls show the major party nominees have the highest unfavorable ratings ever.
And that has some disenchanted voters looking for another option. Green Party candidate Jill Stein is a Harvard-educated physician who wants for government to pay off all student loan debt, make Medicare available to everyone. Those two things that you wish. The Green Party also big on campaign finance reform. Welcome to Memphis, first
Good
of
to
all.
have you here.
Thank you. It's great to be with you.
But a lot of people say, I love what they stand for, but I'm afraid that if I vote that way, so-and-so will get in. What do you say to that?
I'd say, look at the track record here. You know, we had a Democratic White House with 2 Democratic houses of Congress, and what happened? They bailed out Wall Street, you know, without end. They created a surge into Afghanistan. We're now bombing 7 countries. Students are more in debt than ever, can't get out. It was the Democrats, actually, who signed NAFTA, offshored our jobs, and Barack Obama's been pushing for the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is NAFTA on steroids. So there is a different way forward, but we have to stand up and insist on it.
Let me ask you this, though. Some have said that Hillary Clinton is a solution to Donald Trump, and others say Donald Trump is a solution to Hillary Clinton. But you disagree with that?
Well, you know, the polls show that these are the most disliked and untrusted candidates in our history, and they also show that the majority of Donald Trump supporters don't actually support Donald Trump. They're mostly, like, really afraid of Hillary Clinton, and the majority of Hillary Clinton's supporters don't actually support her. They just really are afraid of Donald Trump. So what's wrong with this picture? Democracy is not a question of who do we hate the most and who are we most afraid of. Democracy needs a moral compass, it needs a vision, it needs values. Americans are begging for other choices. What I'm saying is, let's start with democracy. Let's open up the debate. Let's allow voters to actually be informed and be empowered about who their choices are.
But how do you make sure this is not how do you do this? How do you make sure this is not that, quote, vote that is wasted?
Yeah, well, you know, I think you could say there's no greater waste of your vote than to throw your vote away on the parties that have been throwing you under the bus. Americans are struggling to stay out of poverty. There are 22 super billionaires right now who alone have as much money as the lower 50%. People are struggling. Average wages are barely at the poverty level, and a generation of students are locked in debt. And let me add, half of our tax dollars are going into these wars, which are not making us safer. In fact, more than half of our discretionary budget is being spent on these wars that have created failed states, mass refugee migrations, and worse, terrorist threats.
How do you get the message out, though? Because the system that we have definitely favors the candidates with a lot of money to spend. That's how most voters get their information. So how do you do that?
This is why responsible journalism is so critical, because the founders of our country, you know, created a First Amendment and freedom of the press for reasons, because a democracy depends on an educated electorate. So we're saying we need to open up the debates. The American people need to be informed. It's as simple as doing that.
And what do you hear back when you insist on that?
Well, what we hear back is silence, because, you know, that is kind of the name of the game. They're trying, that is, the political establishment and the very big media out there are trying to disappear us, because they know more than half of millennials are looking at a third-party vote. Almost 60% of Americans now, according to a poll last week, are calling for a new independent third party because the 2 major parties have done such a lousy job. I'm the only candidate that's not funded by lobbyists, by big corporate money, and by a super PAC.
Dr. Stein, let me ask you this also. Now, some of the voters you're going after are the Bernie Sanders supporters, but Bernie Sanders obviously has come out in support of Hillary Clinton. How do you convince those supporters to vote for you?
You know, in my experience, they don't need to be convinced. They just need to be informed that they have another option. As Bernie himself said, it's not a man, it's a movement. And people who were his supporters saw their campaign get sabotaged by the Democratic Party, as revealed by the emails that were leaked just before the convention, how the playing field was really tipped against him. The Democratic Party has what we call a kill switch, which they used against not just Bernie, but against Dennis Kucinich, Kucinich, who they redistricted, against Jesse Jackson, for that matter, who was really running a powerful, strong campaign that they basically launched a smear campaign against. They did the same thing to Howard Dean with the Dean Scream. I'm the only candidate that has a solution to the student debt crisis, the only one that says we can make higher education free, and the only one that's proposing a solution to our economic crisis and our climate crisis in one fell swoop, a Green New Deal that would create an emergency jobs program.
If you win, how do you get any of this past Congress?
Great question. And there, the answer is that we, the people, are supposed to be the drivers of the congressional agenda.
Supposed to be.
But
We're
who's
supposed
driving?
to be the boss.
Right.
Yeah.
It's the lobbyists who are calling the shot. We know that from all kinds of things, including studies that verify everyday experience. But if there was a groundswell that put me into the White House, and if we break into the debates, I wouldn't rule that out by any means. If I got into the White House, I would be the organizer-in-chief. For the first time, we would actually have someone in the White House who's working to inform and empower voters so that they are flooding their elected officials' offices when there's a bill coming up. Because right now there's a vacuum, and the lobbyists fill that vacuum. We need to reestablish that engine of our democracy, we the people.
We just have a few seconds left
Sure.
here. What is your message, or what are you hoping about your message will resonate in Memphis, Tennessee? We have a large number of African Americans who live here. We have a growing Latino population. How do you address those voters? What is your message there?
So, you know, the general message is we've got a job. A right to a job is what we're supporting, a right to a job at living wages. We also call for an end to police violence through every community having a police review board and an independent investigator so that communities are controlling their police, not having police control the communities. And on the issue of immigration, we're calling for a welcoming path to citizenship, because everyone in this country, with the exception of African Americans who, you know, had no choice, brought here in chains, and Native Americans, the rest of us are all immigrants. We need to celebrate the immigrants who are at the heart of our economies and our communities. And for the crisis of immigration, the most important thing we can do is to stop causing the crisis in the first place through NAFTA, the war on drugs, and by overturning other governments and destabilizing them. We
Dr.
can fix
Stein,
this.
thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure
Great
to
to be
meet
with
you.
you. Likewise.